I found God chasing the devil. I grew up in the most magical time of music, period. My dad owned a record company called Imperial Records. And from the time I was like a little kid, music was something that made me feel good.
Elvis actually said the real, king of rock and roll was Fats Domino.
Fats Domino was the first guy that I managed. I wouldn't have gotten to be an addict if it wasn't fun getting that high in the first place.
If you can take an addict and you can get them addicted to freedom and you can get them addicted to their own sovereignty and purpose, watch out, because the world is in big trouble because they're going to do a lot of good. Spirituality and capitalism belong together. Those thoughts, those feelings, that comes from something bigger than I am. And together I believe we can all grow. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the planet. All right, well, Andy, I'm happy to have you here today at the studio.
Happy to be here.
Joining us here at the Spiritual Capitalist. So I have Andy Chudd here, and Andy is actually the manager of the King of Rock and Roll, the real King of Rock and Roll.
50 years ago.
Well, the history there is just like pretty incredible.
One of those deals where you get introduced for something that you did 50 years ago.
Yeah,
yet you've lived a whole life doing other things.
Right.
And that's what credibility gets put into. But I was sharing with you my good fortune over the weekend of meeting Priscilla Presley, and that was like, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're live. So really, as I look at you as this individual that is probably the most connected person I've met in Salt Lake City. That is not, by the way, that is not why we're friends. But when I listen to you talk about the history you have here in the city, the things you've done in this city, the people you know in this city, it's really remarkable.
Oh, thanks.
But that shows a lot about who you are as a character, right? Because a lot of the people you know
I like the word character.
Because you are a character for sure.
Yeah.
But the fact of that you have all of these really beautiful relationships, and you have relationships that people I know approach you to get close to those relationships. But it shows how authentic you are, because a lot of times people that have friends that are celebrities and have friends that are well known in the media, they're always asking themselves, like, is this person real? Like, are they actually my friend, or what do they want from me, or what do they want to get from me?
Sure.
So the minute I met you, I became very clear after a 2-hour conversation when we first met that I knew that you were authentically who you were.
But the cool part about it is when we met, Dalton, I didn't know who you were. You didn't know who I was.
No, of course not.
We just started talking about recovery.
Yep.
And then you were talking about your involvement in stuff that you were doing, and the company you ran and all that stuff. And what started as what I thought was going to be a 5-hour conversation ended to be a 2-hour conversation and exchanging numbers and the beginning of a friendship. So, but then just like you said, I have those people that want to know me, not for who I am, but for who I know.
Right.
And
or what they can get.
That's something that's a difficult situation. I'm sure you're with your success, you understand exactly how that is. They want to know you, but they don't necessarily want to know you.
Right. I think the thing is different in my experience, right? I am just like you. You are who you are. I walk around. Nobody knows really anything about the level of success or what I've accomplished in Salt Lake City. Can walk very freely on the road. Like, there's none of that, right? But you being in the city for as long as you have and the things you've done makes a little bit different, right? So we're a little bit different that way. But yes, I remember when we first started talking, I was talking to a lady across the counter, and we were talking about plant medicines and having this beautiful conversation.
Sure.
And I started talking to you about it, and you started telling me, "Nope, I have been. How long have you been in recovery?
25 years.
25 years. Now, this is the one thing also about Andy. When Andy commits to something, you commit to it.
Oh, yeah.
I saw recently also online that you were, 600 days in the gym?
602 days as of this morning.
Amazing.
In a row.
602
with
days.
2 exceptions. Okay, in those 2 days, I was shoveling snow for 2.5 hours. So that worked as my workout.
Counted.
But in 3 states, I've gone to Planet Fitness.
They sponsor the show, by the way.
Every
Just kidding,
day.
they don't. But
They should.
at this point, they should sponsor you.
But give you an example. You know, we talk about impact that we have on other people's lives.
Yeah.
So on the other day when I crossed over 600, I'm in my zone. I'm on the treadmill. My head's down. I'm you know, eyes closed, listening to my music, and there's a tap on my shoulder, and I open my eyes, and they've got 3 of the women that work there have got 600 big gold balloons, right, to celebrate my 600th day. 2 of these women actually didn't work there that day, actually got up because I go exercise. Sometimes I leave my house at like 4:45 a.m. There's not a lot of people up at that time, let alone in. And so that was pretty cool. So it's nice to be noticed for who you are and not what you are, what you can do for somebody. And so that's amazing. You know, it's like there's a big part of my life. My buddy Paul Holbrook, Dalton, you know him. Paul is a playful guy. And we've been in places all over the country, as a matter of fact, all over the world. And he'll do crazy stuff. Like he'll take a $100 bill out of his pocket and then sneak another $100 bill out of his pocket. And he'll have 2 cups. And he'll say, okay, now under one of these cups is something really special. You know, and it might be a $15 breakfast tab.
Right.
And the person picks it up. What's this? That's your tip. You know, it's sometimes doing things for others is a selfish act because it makes you feel good. I was talking to you about that just this morning.
Yeah, and that's actually what I want to get into. I want to get into a little bit of your background, and I want to get into what you've learned through recovery, because the things that you have learned through recovery, for me personally, are very inspiring. They're inspiring because I get to see you on social media doing your workouts. So you call your old man workouts, which like crack up. You're always wearing like hats of your heroes, which are your friends and the businesses. So you're like this walking billboard of support for all these people. Like I pay attention, man, and I see what you're doing, and I see the way you're doing it, and I see how deliberately you're doing it. That's why I wanted to have you on here, because it wasn't just about your background and the success you've seen in the music industry and those stories, which are incredible. But it was more so for me of who you became and the journey of that to the man that sits here in front of me. And I think that's the beauty of all of it.
Cool.
So take me back a little bit.
All right. Well, I mean, I grew up, my dad owned a record company called Imperial Records. And from the time I was like a little kid, music was something that made me feel good. I don't know why. I can't tell you why, but I just clung to it. So at like 5 years old, I'm going into recording studios and being a good 5-year-old sitting there, just like, whoa, I'm entitled to be here. You know, look what's going on here, and not making noise. I mean, I did it the first couple times and got told, hey, you know, you just ruined this take. So
yeah, because at the time when they're recording on records, correct?
They were recording on a thing called an acetate disc. There was no magnetic tape in 1955. Oh. It was, they record direct to a disc, and that disc was taken and plated with metal, and then they made other discs from it, and that's how records were made.
So when you mess up a recording,
now,
you really
they
mess up
don't
a
know
recording.
what records are other than in antique stores and stuff like that, but this is how I grew up. And at that time, records were made out of lacquer. They were 78 RPMs. They, you know, so in my life, you watch all of this growth from no tape to tape, from 1 track to 2 track, which was stereo. And I mean, I remember my father had this big cabinet brought into our house, and neither my brother nor my mother nor I knew what it was, but it was a stereo cabinet that had a turntable in the middle and a tuner in it, like a AM tuner because FM was like non-existent. And my father brought in this acetate. It wasn't even a record, and put it on this deal and had my brother and I stand in the middle between the two speakers and close our eyes, and you could feel the music moving back and forth. Now, that was my first experience with stereo. And it was an artist named Henry Renee, and I don't think it sold 10 records. But the point is that I watched that go into things like Dark Side of the Moon, which was life-changing for Pink Floyd.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody, and, drugs too, but that was life-changing for me. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, all those were genius. People talk about them like kind of like this is happening now and that's happening now. This was like I grew up in the most magical time of music, period.
I agree.
Not only did I have the ability to be around people, but I met people that are gods.
Your dad's record company, just because people that listen probably don't know that record company.
Right.
Who was your dad representing? I mean, when we're talking
my
about
dad had Imperial
around.
Records, and Fats Domino was a huge star. Ricky Nelson was part of the Ozzie and Harriet family group. My father actually created what was known as the forerunner of MTV. They had a half-hour TV show, and the half-hour TV show, if you know the breakdown, is literally 22 minutes on tape. Everything else is commercials. But back in those days, in 1956 and 57, the TV shows were owned by the sponsor. So the sponsor of that particular show was Eastman Kodak. So my father and Ozzie Nelson, who was Ricky's father, also an attorney by education, but never practiced. He was a band leader. They went back and they sat down with Eastman Kodak and they said, we need to cut 3 minutes out of every show. And they're like, we've only got 22 minutes. You're taking it down to 19 minutes. Well, the writers can take care of that. But here's what we want to do. At the end of every show, we want to do Ricky's next record, have girls in the audience screaming and stuff for Ricky, his band playing, and, obviously lip syncing, the music's in the background. But that literally became part and parcel of that show. Mm. So virtually every other show because they didn't make albums then, they made singles. Singles were promoted on radio. The whole thing is, I grew up, I got to see Frank Sinatra live. I got to see Elvis probably 20 times live. I got to see the Beatles, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The price of tickets. I saw the Beatles for $6, Elvis for $6, Aretha Franklin for $3.50. But the metamorphosis of the music business changed with Napster. Mm. See, you got to remember, I lived through 78 records, then 33 records. Then 45 records, then 33, which were albums, were made of collections of singles. Okay, then we morphed into tapes. So you had 4-track tapes that went in cars, 8-track tapes that went in cars. Eventually cassettes.
So you're raised around this your entire life. I mean, from a young kid, you're seeing top artists all over. Your dad's representing top artists all over, and then eventually you decide yourself. And about how old were you when you decided to get into the music industry yourself?
6.
You're 6.
No,
okay.
I mean, basically, what happened was, I think. I wasn't a big education guy. I have a younger brother who's got all the degrees that I didn't get. But the music is one of those deals, Dalton, where I wanted to alter my state. Music altered my state.
Were you happy at home?
LSD altered my state.
Were you happy at home though? Like were you happy at home with the life that you were living? Because I hear so much of the escaping through music, the altering of state,
I wanted bigger and better. I don't think it was unhappiness as much as it was, how do I get here?
Where was here?
Well, just to feel just like euphoric. I mean, anybody that's been addicted knows that you chase it. You know, you start, it's pretty innocent. You take one pill. When I quit using Lortab, I was using 60 10 milligram Lortabs a day, which would kill any 3 individuals. And I didn't do it for a week or a month. I did it for years. I am married to a woman who had 13 years of sobriety when I finally got sober. So she knows all about Al-Anon. She knows about all of those parts. We've been together for well over 4 decades, 46 years. And she's the light of my life. She's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. But when I was doing stuff that I wanted to be doing, I wasn't exactly secretive about it.
Right.
You know, I doctor shopped. I did everything in desperation that any addict does. And
did you have it together professionally? Like, were people aware that you were, taking this amount of drugs?
I was the CEO of a publicly held company when I quit.
Oh, wow.
And making a good deal of money. And that's where I got the money to pay for the drugs that I took. I was so ensconced in my use that I wouldn't even leave work. I would have my drugs delivered to me in massive quantities.
Did you ever try to quit during that period of time? I mean, how long is this that you're addicted between, obviously music for a long period of time. You start smoking, weed
I started
when you're
smoking
younger.
weed, but I did crazy stuff. I got high. There was a product called Instant Icer, which you'd stick a glass on it, it would ice the glass. But if you took it and put it in a bottle or in a bag and then inhaled it, you'd go on kind of like a short acid trip. And I ended up doing that a lot. I ended up doing,
How many years are you doing this, though?
Well, I started using marijuana when I was probably 15 years old, so 1965. And I quit in 1999. That's a long time.
That is a long time. Did you ever try to quit between there?
I did kind of quit. In 1968, the Beatles quit doing drugs, supposedly. And they went into transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
So I decided that was for me. That's what I was going to do. So I went to Westwood and I signed up for transcendental meditation.
That was a big deal at that time.
You talk about spiritual. Okay, twice in my life, I have been in a room where I wasn't aware of something or somebody being there and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was in a room in Westwood at the Transcendental Meditation Center, and the Maharishi walked in behind me, and I felt it.
Really?
I know that's insane, but I turned around, he looked at me and just giggled. And I was like, okay, I'm home. This is it. This is my place. And it was my place for a month. And then I was like, I'm okay with this.
What turned you away from that? So you have this really almost a spiritual awakening slightly, right? It's like the tickle of, as you just called it.
No. It's like, all I can, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything like that, but the things that I read about people that experienced Jesus, and I'm not putting the Maharishi on that level.
Right.
I'm just telling you that I've never had the experience like that. The next time I felt that same experience, my wife and I was a year sober, and we went to the International AA Convention in Minneapolis. We were in the Metrodome with 50,000 other people saying the Serenity Prayer, and that same feeling came over me. And, once again, we're talking about spiritual. I'm not a religious guy. I was raised Jewish. But the minute I was done with my bar mitzvah, I was done. I got married to my first wife by a rabbi. Other than that, in Utah, we have this title, Jack Mormon, somebody who was raised in the LDS church and then leaves. I'm a Jack Jew. I mean, Judaism is one thing. You know, I grew up being Jewish, and, you know, we were talking about racism. I experienced stuff firsthand that people don't even know about. I was the only white guy on a bus with black guys going into black neighborhoods where people were like, who's he? But I grew up in the Fairmont Hotel, which is a pretty fancy hotel in New Orleans, that had colored restrooms and colored drinking fountains. That didn't work for me because I already told you the story of our housekeeper and how she was a member of our family. You look at the pictures of my bar mitzvah, and she's sitting there with her son. Her son's at the party table with me, and she's sitting with family members of mine. This is how I was brought up. So to go into that situation, to travel to the South and experience that was a totally odd experience. Those are things that I'm not saying I use them as an excuse to get high, but I use getting high to kind of buffer how I was feeling about stuff. Because people that know me know that I have no filter. I mean, if I think that something's unjust, you'll hear it. If I think that somebody's using me for something, you'll hear it. I'm of that ilk. But I had lost every bit of belief in God. And I went to my wife and I said, I'm addicted. This is what I'm going to do. She goes, you're going to go through treatment.
Because she knows, obviously, you're addicted.
Yeah, no. I'd leave the house and she'd go, don't die today.
Jeez.
And I'd go, look, I just bought you this, I just bought you that.
And the fact that she stayed with you through all that, that's
that
is love, man.
She stayed with me, not just then. I created wealth for our family and then lost it all, and she didn't leave. I went out and got a job. I went out and sold windows and sunrooms and siding for 10 years. She stayed. Got her own job.
So she helps you get sober then, because you had at that point in time basically just lost all faith in what? Humanity, God, all the above?
I think that organized religion never was for me. But I had, here's a perfect example of me. I'm always looking for angles, right? So I've gone through rapid detox. I'm going into treatment, and my wife takes me to an AA meeting in Murray. And I go to this meeting and I see a guy that owes me some favors. And she goes, you know what would be powerful is if you go into treatment and they ask you if you have a sponsor and you have one. So I go to the guy and I'm like, hey, how's it going? He says, are you new here? I said, yeah, brand new, like brand spanking new. Like Friday I went through rapid detox. It's Monday. I'm back. I'm still shaking and quaking. And he goes, well, you know, what did you like? Like, were you a beer guy? I said, no. Alcohol wasn't my thing. It was pain meds. And he goes, Andy, I know nothing about that. Let me introduce you to this guy. And he introduced me to somebody I don't know. And he says, well, I'm willing to, you know, make some sacrifices for you, but you have to make sacrifices for me and for yourself. You have to become willing. You have to admit you're whatever, an addict, an alcoholic, I don't care who you are, what you are, but you have to admit that to you. And then you have to admit it to God. And I go, well, I don't believe in God. And he's like, we'll get there. So I think like in our third meeting, he said, here's what I want you to do. He says, when you go to bed tonight, you take your shoes off. I said, well, I don't take my shoes off and then go to bed. And he goes, how about this? When you take your shoes off, do it by your bed. Stick your shoes under your bed. So you have to get on your knees. Okay. And he said, say thank you in your head. thank you. I said, well, okay, what's the deal? He says, did you stay sober that day? Yeah. Say thank you. When you get up in the morning to reach for your shoes, say please. You're saying, please let me stay sober this day. He said, Andy, we all need a higher power. And I don't care if it's that sign, you need that higher power. And it worked. You know, sorry.
So beautiful, man. So beautiful.
I heard a line in a song saying, I found God chasing the devil. I did that. I didn't think that. But looking back on, like, I'd go to meetings and I would resent people saying, well, you know, it was my day, I was this, I was that, I was this. I got news for you. I wouldn't have gotten to be an addict if it wasn't fun getting that high in the first place. But I wasn't cognizant of the fact that I was chasing that high for years and years. And I would do anything I could to alter that. I'd try this. I tried heroin. I tried cocaine. I tried meth. And this is not braggadocio, just so we're clear. If I could go back and change that, I would. Because I've lived 25 years where I don't do aspirin. I do homeopathic stuff and topicals. I've had surgeries with no, local anesthetic only, no fentanyl, no Ativan, no Valium, none of that stuff. And somehow I've made it through. I'm still here. I'm 74 years old. By all rights, everything that I did to myself should have killed me years ago. You know, I had a doctor look at me and tell me I had so much in my system that I should be dead. And yet I was taking massive quantities and getting things accomplished. You talked about, were you functioning? I was functioning. I facilitated the sale of my business during all this.
Jeez. Andy, do you still do the same thing with your shoes every day?
No, I don't need to. I have total comfort in praying. I have a God that comforts me. I don't define my God. I don't do anything. I wish for some people that I see going through the pain that I went through, that they could find what I found. I say God bless to people. I say things that I thought would be sacrilegious 25 years ago. I mean them in earnest today. I don't know that there's a God in the infinite spot, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if God was a woman. So, because I've been placed in situations of being honored to be around people. I mean, that constant coincidence on the other day on Saturday to meet Priscilla Presley was like godlike to me, because I'm talking to a guy who's a friend of mine who I met at the same place I met you. And we spent till 5:00 in the morning one day just BSing right after FanX. And he's telling me what he does and all this stuff, just like I learned about you. And then he learned about me. And, he was like, hey, man, you need to tell that story to Priscilla. And I'm like, yeah, well, if I knew her. And he goes, you don't know her? Come with me. That kind of engagement only happens if there's somebody else up there pulling the strings, because it isn't about me.
There's something magic about that. The thing that keeps coming up to me is going through all that process, right?
Sure.
Going through the addiction, going through some of those deeper times, how did you forgive yourself?
You know, that's a really good question, because it was one of those deals where I did in the very beginning. I made excuses. And I had guidance of wiser people than me. The one thing that diminishes when you admit to yourself and going through the 8th and 9th steps of AA, admitting to yourself, God, and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. For me, that was like tough. I mean, there's a thing called the 9th step where you actually go and say, Dalton, I did this. For that, I'm truly sorry. I understand that you may never forgive me for it, but I need you to know that I am genuinely aware of it and sorry for it. And I would do drive-by 9th steps. I would pull up to Dalton's house knowing that I have to go and do this, and then turn around and leave. And it would take everything within my soul to be able to do that. The darkness that I experienced, I've in my later life, in my sober life, I've been involved with anti-suicide. I've been involved a big part anti-bullying. A guy named John Apsey, who was the Utah Jazz Bear for 25 years, and I actually started the Utah Anti-Bullying Coalition. And too much politics got into it, so I left. But I never stopped being involved. I never stopped. If it wasn't going my way, I actually gained some self-respect and saying, well, this isn't what I started. I need to leave. They don't need me. I need to leave, because otherwise I'm going to start feeling bad and getting in that dangerous spot. You don't ever want to get to the point of despair. And, you know, being around some people, I've heard some like life-changing stories. I served on the board of a charity called Bands for Freedom, and we raised money for our troops. And I got some amazing, amazing friends. I mean, I got to hang out with, because what I did was I got country music people involved, because they're the biggest patriots on the planet. And we're raising money for the troops. And there's this thing called the Armed Forces Relief Trust. And the Armed Forces Relief Trust takes the money that they receive and sends it out to the different relief societies, Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard, and they do it in direct proportion to how our troops are serving. So the Army's getting the most money, then the Marines, then the Navy, then the Air Force, then the Coast Guard. That's how it gets broken down. But I'm meeting with like Admiral Steve Abbott, who's the head of this thing and used to be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And these guys are like, you know, what you're doing is cool.
Yeah, it's, you know, your story's so beautiful because you come from this place of, again, rock and roll, right? And it's usually, you look at rock and roll, it's sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean, that has been said many times over. I'm not the one that coined this term. But the
nor am I.
No.
But I did everything I could.
It though, right?
I did everything I could to take part in all three.
Yeah, you enjoyed that. You went through that, and then you found the darkness and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then you come from this place in time of where you were chasing money. I know that whole story about your businesses and selling your business and all the things that happened there. Mm-hmm. And then going through this place of sobriety, right? Of, as I call it, just breaking the chains of being free. Because everyone's an addict in some sort. Like, I don't think that anybody can say I'm not an addict. I know. But the thing about an addict, though, is that when someone's an actual addict to their core, like, you know for a fact that whatever they get addicted to, they get addicted to. One of my mentors always says, if you can take an addict and you can get them addicted to freedom and you can get them addicted to their own sovereignty and purpose, watch out. Because the world is in big trouble because they're going to do a lot of good.
Oh, yeah.
And what I see is that you took all of that pain, you took all that darkness, you took your conversations and this new realization in something higher than yourself, and you started to ask yourself, what is this new drug that I can have? And that drug is You used your influence that you had created over here, and you turned around and you decided, instead of using it for gain or self-purpose or grandializing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
The word I'm looking for. But instead of doing that, you actually use it for a force of good. And you've been involved in, I mean, countless amounts of nonprofits.
Well, the thing is, when I moved to Utah 50 years ago, one of my good friends in LA goes, "What are you going to do in Utah?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "If you're not Mormon and you're not Republican, you're dead." I said, 1 out of 2 ain't bad. So I got involved in the Republican Party when I moved here. And once again, I'm a Republican, but I'm also an independent thinker and a good deal more arrogant than I am now. And I come to Utah, and one of the first things I go through, I wasn't even 25, and I go to this, they have caucuses in Utah. They don't have them in California. And then they have convention in Utah. They don't have them in California. And I get selected to be a delegate, and I go to convention, and this one guy, and I won't mention who he is, but people would know, goes, "It's real simple in Utah. We just vote a straight party ticket." And only an idiot would vote a straight party ticket. And he looked at me like I was from Mars. And I said, "You know what? I think. And I don't understand what you're talking about. Because the governor isn't a Republican. He's a decent guy. First 2 governors while I was here, Calvin Rampton and Scott Matheson, were both Democrats. And I ran into Scott Matheson at a bar in Cottonwood Heights called the Cotton Bottom. I had no idea who he was. And we're sitting there BSing with each other. Just a great guy. He had like 3 days beard growth on his face. He'd just come back from deer hunting. And he introduced himself, and I was like, "Aren't you running for governor?" He goes, "I am." He wasn't drinking beer. He was having a garlic burger at the counter at the Cotton Bottom, and I was sitting next to him. But since then, I have had the good fortune of knowing and being known by a number of politicians, not just celebrities or sports stars or anything like that.
How many nonprofits you've been involved with?
17, I want to say.
That's really where you put I would say that's where you put your energy, or what I would say
today,
that addictive energy you have, you put it towards nonprofits.
Absolutely.
I've seen you told me that you took 15,000 kids to Christmas shopping.
Not me, but my group.
Your organization. My group, correct.
Yeah. Farmers and Friends for Kids.
You did one of the largest,
15,000.
I know you were telling me a while ago that you had done one of the largest nonprofits when it came to mascots on the planet.
Well, I mean, that's not me. That's John Absey. I've been involved in it, but it's Mascot Miracles Foundation. But it's like John Absey, the Utah Jazz Bear for 25 years, one of my best friends. First appearance he ever made as a jazz bear was at my business.
Right.
And I sucked him into the vortex of every single charity either my wife or I were involved in. He did fashion shows for in-around therapy animals. He did stuff for the Adoption Exchange. He did stuff for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, the Thurl Bailey's basketball camp, Brian Russell Foundation. All those deals where I was involved, I go, you know what I mean? And I've been a fortunate guy. I mean, my utility with Thurl Bailey's basketball camp. Thurl Bailey was a customer at my car wash, and we became friends. And he one day he walks up to me and he hands me these brochures. He said, "Would you mind if I put the brochures here? This is for my basketball camp, and it's in Murray, and my car wash was in Murray." I said, "Absolutely. Let me put it up on the reader board." We had the first color reader board in the state of Utah. Just like we were the first car wash in Utah to do EFT.
Yeah, you were telling me that.
And those things, but what ended up happening was I got involved in the basketball camp, and I was working with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I said to Thurl, "I'll go raise the money. But for every paying kid we have coming, just like I was telling you about the golf thing, we're going to have a Make-A-Wish kid." And then those kids got the gift because we'd have Karl Malone or David Robinson or John Stockton.
Why did you do that though? Like what comes into this is actually what I want to look in deeper.
Selfishness. With you. It makes me feel good. It gives me the same high that I used to get from doing drugs. I get that euphoric feeling. If you take a little kid that's got nothing, I mean nothing, and you take a child of privilege and you take them Christmas shopping, the child of privilege is going to naturally take that kid to where they want to go. Buy a bicycle. You got $100. Buy a bicycle, buy a video game. And the little kid says, no, my sister needs shoes or my mother needs underwear or whatever it happens to be. That's like a slap in the face change of state for that individual. They're like, oh my gosh, well, let's do this. Then they want to be of help. That's what I get. I get over all of my resentments of the people who don't show up. You know, there's three kinds of people who get involved in charities. One is the ones that will just give you money and they'll put people in their spot and never show up. Two is the people who are always there to set up tables and do all the work, and then they're there for the event and they don't leave early. And then there's the ones that I hate, and that's the ones that show up for the Facebook photo, absolutely doing nothing. That irks me. It doesn't make me feel good, but the other stuff just makes you feel so much better. I mean, to be able to have a friend like Paul Holbrook say to me, hey, we're going to do this thing at this indigenous tribe in the Philippines. I'd like to, see if you'd like to get involved. We're bringing water to this tribe.
I know that's how I met Paul originally, was because he showed me what he was doing with the film and how they were taking water to the tribe over there. And that's why when he did the thing,
you were part of it.
Yeah.
And then we went from one country to another, and then we're doing a deal and Paul's son Heisman is with us, and we're sharing all this stuff together. And the thing is, you do that thing for one day, but it resonates with you. I mean, I watched this. We were at an orphanage, and and the lady that runs it is an expatriate New Zealander. She's a nurse. She was an ambulance driver and a helicopter pilot. And she goes to Thailand and starts this orphanage. And the orphanage is mainly children who are disposable. They're on the Myanmar border. They're hearing gunshots every night of people trying to get across the border into Thailand. I mean, and then you see the gratitude for a candy bar. You see, going to that indigenous tribe in the Philippines was life-changing for me. You go to a place where you're giving them something that you throw away, and it's like treasure. It changes the way you look at things, and it gives you greater perspective. And what I can tell you unequivocally is doing the nonprofit stuff. I get asked all the time, why do you do this? How come you're doing this? Why? I mean, these people have all this money or all this. Why are you doing this? I said, well, I have a niche. I have something that I can do. They can't. I can bring somebody to the table. They can't. I can do, I was talking to you about the Phenows and bringing Little Kington is going to play in that Pro-Am a week from today. I'm so excited about it because of what it'll do for Liberty Village, which is another thing I'm excited about. My wife will tell you that I get this look, and it's like, it's insatiable. It's something I want to consume, but I want to share. I want you to have that feeling. I got back from the Philippines, and Paul had discussed with me that you just sent a check, right? And I said, well, I'm going to go out to lunch with him. And we went out to lunch at that place downtown and just sat there for a couple of hours once again. And I was just like, dude, you got to come with us next time. And the only reason for that is the magic that happens. And the fulfillment for your soul. I don't
I think
know.
that
I don't
was
know how to convey it any other
I think
way.
it was in like January or something like that when I saw that he'd put a post up, right, and saying what
Yeah.
you guys were doing. And I thought, well, here's a guy that does very, very well financially. He owns some incredible businesses in China. You were part of it. I met him when he flew here to Salt Lake City and was
Right.
doing some work out here. And I thought, well, and it wasn't, this is the thing I love about Spirit, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
It was not my choice. Like, yes, it was
It
my choice
came
to
to you.
do it, but it was like, no, you're going to do this. I'm like, okay. Like, that's just how that works, right? And did I feel good by doing that? Of course I felt good, and we connected from it. And I think that I realize how privileged I am in the United States. I realize how privileged I am by being able to create businesses. I tell people constantly, like, do you realize we live in the most free place in the world? Yes, we have rules. Yes, we have taxes. Yes, we have all these things. But we have the opportunities that most people never in a million years understand that we have at our fingertips.
Oh my
and that is
goodness.
incredible to me. And I love how you've taken all of your privilege, all of your relationships, all of these things, and you continue to give to those that are in need. So when it comes to people that have been facing the same demons that you faced for such a long time in your life, like
Sure.
the fact that you did what you have done, not from just the fact of what you do with the nonprofits, not that you manage one of the greatest artists of all time, but the fact that you are able to create sobriety in your own life, to break those chains of freedom, to mean to have that life, that is almost unheard of for most people. Most of the time it's either death or prison. What do you tell those people that are in the same situation that you were at that time?
My viewpoint changed. When I got sober, I was at a point in my life where all I wanted to do is create this reputation of me. Who's Andy? What does Andy do? But in my business, right, I created a separate entity where I was teaching people how to do the business I was in, but adding to it a number of things that they didn't. I'm dealing with people in the car wash business, that daddy owned a car wash, so you own the car wash, that stuff. And I'm getting brought in to say, this is a life changer. This is what you do. EFT's magic. Now, every single car wash in the country is EFT.
Right.
Right? But we had full service car washes. COVID changed all that. So these guys are making money hand over fist. They have no labor cost. I have 70 people on the ground.
So what do you tell them, Andy? What do you tell the people that are sitting there asking right now? They're sitting in this room and they say, Andy, tell me what?
One secret?
Just tell me.
Give back and observe. Don't just give back. Don't just write a check. Because if you're not involved, writing a check is one thing. Hearing the story and being able to convey that story is another. Watching that kid in Walmart, that's the story. I took a group of successful guys from Max Place. We all did this deal, and we videotaped the families after they had gone shopping and listening to the kids' stories. Here, I have it on Dropbox, and every time I get to that point where I used to probably take a pill or something, I have that. I can go watch that. I can go think back to that, or I can, jump into music. I tell people to focus away. I have this friend, and God bless her, but she's having some major emotional difficulties, and I've tried to reach out and say, look, no matter what, I don't care what time of day it is. Many of us aren't willing to go to that extent. Everything stops at 5 o'clock, whatever. I'm not that guy. I have, and when you talk about my wife and I, one of the things that probably kept us together is she was doing charity while I was still getting high, and I was able to help with that. So I was using that kind of as a crutch to make me feel better. I don't know of a way I can convey the feeling that you get, the euphoric feeling that I get. I walked away from that meeting with Priscilla Presley and I was like, walking on a cloud. I got to meet Katie Seagal. I'm walking on a cloud. And then I'm sitting by myself in this room thinking to myself, look what just happened to me today. And I got to see Ryan. I got to see Paul. I got to see Tiffany. I got to see Jamie. I got to hang out with the Rockwell team and play with puppies. What a day.
Right.
And, some of it will never convey. People will never get that experience until they get it on their own. That spiritual feeling, I'm not a religious guy. I believe in a power higher than myself that I choose to call God, but I'm not that singing a hymn in church. I'm respectful of that. I found myself in the last month being at 2 weddings and 2 funerals, and I expected to see some of my friends at these things because they were families of people I watched do stuff for all of them. And then I got to that point, why am I resenting them for not being there when I should be thinking to myself, I was there? Our thought patterns change. So, I've been gifted a life of amazement. And I think that has transcended virtually everything. Obviously I like talking, but I like listening to stories, and I can glean from stories I heard. You and I were talking about recovery centers. We were talking about all this different stuff, and it ended up coming to my love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, Dalton, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And you're like turning it on me. Well, what are you doing here? And I'm like, wait a minute. I was asking you. I'm not looking for that, but it happens a lot.
Yeah, I love people, and you do too.
It happens a lot.
And I remember when we did meet, we met at a social club, and that social club people were drinking.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Are you gonna drink?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't drink. Like I just don't drink." And you're like, "Yeah, me neither." And I was like, "Well, let's talk about that." Like, and it wasn't the fact of talking about, oh, I'm sober or you're sober or in recovery. It wasn't, because that's not what it is for me. But it was just a conversation we could have, and you started asking me, questions. And so I think it's a curiosity in human beings that there's so much going on around us at all given times, that if we stop being selfish and we start looking outside of ourselves and asking questions like you would ask, like, how can I help? How can I be in service? What can I do? There's so much power in that, instead of saying, why me? Why am I this? Why am I that? Like, why is the world this way? And instead of saying, what can I do to shift and change what I don't like in the world?
Well, what engaged me about you? Seriously. We were talking, and I was talking to you a little bit about spirituality, and you went deep. You went into doing this, doing that, doing that. No.
It's true, though. That's who I am, though.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm
I
saying
don't
to
take it
you,
that way.
that's one of the things that engaged me about you. Paul Holbrook and I are sitting in a country halfway around the world, and he said, Dalton Locke, and I go, Dalton's a cool dude, this and this and this and that. And he goes, whoa, I was just telling you he wrote me a check.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like the passion arises when somebody inspires.
Well said.
I was challenged by something the other day. A friend of mine's daughter sent me a video. And the video says, you want to talk about thinking about today and what today is. I want you to put yourself into 100 years from today. Why? Well, I'm trying to show you how important today is. Okay. Who will know who Andy Chudd was in 100 years? Nobody. Your loved ones won't be here anymore. After generation and generation and generation, like I share my love for my grandfather with my grandchildren. They know my oldest grandchild got to spend time with my grandfather, who was the magic man, who to me was an inspiration. When my father, who was a tough guy, told me I was not good enough and all this stuff, he'd get on the phone and we'd be on the phone, and you got to remember, long distance was expensive in those days. So we got that once a week conversation. My grandfather would get on the phone with me, get on the phone with my brother. My brother would be talking about school or something like that. My grandfather would go, "So how are you doing, son? Fine." He goes, "No, what's going on?" He could cut through the BS and immediately know that I wasn't in a good spot. And he'd just build me up. Do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know how much I love you? Do you know how much I miss you? It inspired me to, he passed away when I was 35. That's almost 40 years ago. And like it was yesterday, I hear that in my head. That's what I'm talking about. What you said to me about what you were doing to get to a higher level didn't make me want to try it, but it made me envious of people that can get to that space.
I think, though, Andy, the space that you're in, look, like most people do that type of work. They do plant medicines or they do, all this work, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're trying to get to the same place that you already are. Think about it. Think about it. You went from having everything, you lost everything to find who you are, to find the love inside, to find your heart, to find out the things that Dad said didn't really matter, that you loved him, to be able to see these things and to realize that we're all one, we're all connected, and that the only way for us to grow and to truly get really high, like the ultimate high, the feeling of like, oh my God kind of high, is when we serve other people. When
Amen.
we see those that are
100%.
without, being able to lift them up a little bit, and even more importantly than just to be able to serve or give, but to be able to take someone and to be able to install that self-love for themselves so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. Because it's not you, it's not me, it's them. But sometimes someone needs a hand up instead of a hand out, right?
Yeah.
So I had a good friend of mine used to tell me that all the time.
The Maharishi, right? Now, once again, people looked at it as a cult. I didn't care. I'd had 2 dear friends overdose. And I was looking for another path because I was afraid that was going to happen to me. Not because I was doing everything or injecting. I never did intravenous drugs. Those guys were doing that. But Maharishi said something that stuck with me. He said, imagine if 20 minutes twice a day makes you a better person by this much, and everybody else in the world did it. The world is a better place.
It raises consciousness.
Exactly. And I said, I have people tell me all the time, well, I'm not you, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And I said, do you honestly believe in your heart of hearts that it was just given to me and I just said, oh, okay, and took it? It wasn't.
Of course not.
This is stuff that you work for. Inspiration comes from desperation, period. Regardless of the fact that how much I know that I was loved, I didn't love me. If I did, I wouldn't have done all the things I did to myself. It's miraculous. I sit there and like the girls at the gym are always just great because I'll sit and chat with them and stuff. But here's the things that I do that are different. Like they make my day better. And I'm like leaving the gym and I said, can I have your email address and your boss's email address? Well, what for? I said, and I literally say, look, in a previous life, I was a consultant. And the 2 biggest things that I was being consulted for were customer service and employee retention. This person is magic. And I don't know how much you're paying them, but it isn't enough. I'm that guy. Like Paul and his partner, MD, hilarious. We're at the Capitol Grill. I'm not doing a commercial for any place, and we're having this amazing meal, right? And these guys are like goofing on the poor waitress, right? Until she looks at the tip.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm the guy that walks into a restaurant and gets amazing service. And I'm the one that goes, hey, what's your name? To the waiter or the waitress. And they'll tell me. And then during that conversation, I'll refer to them by name. When I was in the tanning business or the car wash business, the people that I considered my goodwill ambassadors, I'd say, look, if you want power, give it back. What's that? Well, when somebody drives into the car wash, you could say, hey, welcome to Buffs and Puffs today. Or, hey, Dalton, welcome to Buffs and Puffs. You know what just happened? Your sales went up. And I gave them this. There's a guy named Harry Lorraine. He was a magician, and he did a memory course, and I gave it to my top service writers. We didn't have menus. We had service writers. What would you like today?
Yeah, I love the way that you were looking at things so differently. We had that conversation as well about the way, I mean, that's one of the things I talked to you about for a long time was the way that you ran your car wash business, which I think is for a whole other episode, a whole other show, because we could go on for a while there. But you did say something, and that is that the whole concept of 100 years, right? You're not going to remember in 100 years and after that. And so you might as well be remembered for now, right? Yeah. And do it today. But when the coffin hits the ground and you're no longer here and your family is sitting around and they're talking about Andy, how do you want them to remember you? Like, what do you want to be remembered for by your friends, your community, your family?
To be honest with you, I want to be remembered as somebody who gave back. I want to be remembered for my flaws too. I don't want to be remembered as just the good guy. I want to remember. I told you, my license plate says grateful. I had to learn that lesson because when I got sober, I wasn't grateful for anything. I wasn't grateful to be sober. And it took one gift of one guy to say, be grateful for today. You know, when I first got sober, I didn't think I'd ever get to the point I'm at now. And I lived with somebody who wasn't a public speaker, became the chairwoman of the International Women's AA Conference. I spoke in front of big crowds all the time. My wife goes, how do you do it? And I go, you just do it. You just, well, no. And God bless her. I mean, she went and got sucked into the vortex. She was probably 3 years sober, and she's on the board of the International Women's AA Conference. 2 years later, she's the chairwoman when it's coming to Salt Lake City. And I watched her do that, and I did everything I could to help her, but not take over. And that, you know, sometimes when we see our loved ones going in the wrong direction, you want to give them that, no, hold on, let me grab the wheel for you. Don't do it. Be there to be of service. That's what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered for all of my flaws, for my temper, for whatever. But I also want to be remembered for the good that I did. And a lot of the people that want to know me want to know me for the wrong reasons. But the ones that want to know me because they want to get involved, that's the gift. You have to filter through all the BS to get to the golden nuggets. That's what I want to be remembered for. That's it.
That is one of the most honest, real answers I've heard. It wasn't about just the fact I want to be remembered for being a great dad or, you know, being like someone that's changing the world or whatever. The fact you said you want to be remembered for your flaws, it humanizes you. But we're all such flawed human beings, right? I am the most flawed human being that you'll ever meet. And because of those flaws, because of all of those things that either I have gone through, I have created, I have done, I have wronged, it also then is the offset of that too, because I felt that pain, right? And just like you trying to find that self-love and all those things, it wasn't for those things, then I would never go look for those other things. Because I would say, I've already arrived. I've got it all figured out. I am enlightened. I've got, you know, all of that. But that's not the facts. And the facts are we are always growing. If not, we're dying. And so I love that. Is there anything that's on your heart right now that you would like to share before, we end this interview? Is there anything that like comes up to you that you would like to share some wisdom? Because you've got a bit of time on this earth.
The wisdom I have is acceptance and gratitude for others. If I can give you that, like, what drew me to you? I mean, there's all sorts of people that want to talk to me or are talking to me, or he knows this or he knows that. I mean, Max Place, perfect example. Love the place, right?
Of course.
I met one of my dear friends, Ryan Ennis, a talented musician. And same thing with Brady McIntyre. I met him one day. If you look on the wall in Brady's office, all the memorabilia and stuff.
Yeah, Brady's a great guy.
I gave him my Roy Orbison autographed album. Why? Because my kids don't value it. If you can find value that you can give to somebody else that they'll treasure, and you have it, and it costs you nothing to give it, knowledge is one of those things. The biggest thing is many people aren't willing to accept it, except for on their own terms, right? So you have to search out the individuals. I mean, you asked me to do this. It was like, absolutely, I'll do it.
And I appreciate that.
And yet, I have to be honest with you. I get asked to do a podcast at least once a week.
Sure.
And I turn them down. And the only reason I go, so what possible purpose I'm just some schlemiel, I don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to belittle myself, honestly.
Sure.
But I have value. I know my value. I have the gift of having people who not only know my value, but tell me I'm undervaluing myself.
Right.
Ryan Bowen, Paul Holbrook, Aaron Grennan, I have this Brady McIntyre, all these guys, Sean Reyes, all these guys are like, I don't understand what you're doing. Why? Kent Crawford, the big guy at Channel 2. I mean, we're doing all this stuff, and he's like, they shake their head. Why are you doing it? I said, the secret is I dig it. I get my jollies from it. I can provide this experience that other people can't, and I get to watch. I get to be that spectator. And you know what? Leaving that participant deal to become the spectator is what I'm trying to do with all the charities that I'm involved in. I'm explaining to the younger people like yourself, saying, guys, look, I'm not passing away tomorrow.
Right.
Okay? But there's a changing of the guard that needs to happen. And while I've still got all my coconuts, let me help you. Let me impart wisdom to you so you can make that into Dalton's thing, or you can make it into Aaron's thing, or Ryan's thing, or Paul's thing, or Brady's thing. These are the things that I want to give.
I would say to you, just in closing, is that you, to me, are one of the wisdom holders, right? You come from a period that nobody will remember. The records on your shirt, many people don't even know what they are, how they work.
Yeah.
And you also have a lot of the darkness that you went through to be able to expose the light, and the light that you have and the way that you light up a room and the stories you can share. Nobody's going to get those. And part of doing that, and part of getting yourself out there and doing shows like this, we're obviously growing, and we will continue to grow. But if you can continue to put yourself out there, then what it will do is it will help you in the future, which is one of the reasons we actually created the Spiritual Capitalist, is aligning like-minded people that want to create change in the world, and they just don't know who to work with, who to talk to, who to trust. And so it's like building up their messages, right? And bringing their messages to the world. And so I believe that you're part of that guard, and a part of the guard of making sure that you're able to share those things to be able to attract the right people so that you go out and go make more change, because you can't do it on your own. None of us can. So by doing that, it will only leverage your message more and more and more. And the louder that message gets, the more people you're going to be able to help.
Cool.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate our conversation.
Thank you so much.
Serious. And man, I wish you all the best success. But if anybody wants to find out more about you, or if they want to donate to any of the causes that you're working with, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, I mean, instant message me. I'm on Facebook, Andy Chudd, CHUDD. I'm on Instagram. Call me. I don't, I basically say, I'm doing this thing called Profound Impact, and it's just a rant that I do. I go to the gym and I work out, and then I come home, change into my sauna suit, and I go walk 2 miles every day. And then I just pull something out of my rear end and I go, this is what I'm talking about today. And I at the end of it, I'm pretty much always saying, look, reach out to me.
Yep.
Instant message, text message, email, whatever. I'm old school, Chudd@AOL.com. I get chastised all the time for it, but
hey, they'll find
I'm a creature of habit. It works. And then I say to people, hey, smoke signals. I don't know how to read them, but whatever, if you're in a point of desperation or you're in a point where you think I can help you, I'm there.
I love it, man.
That's simple.
To me, it's more so what can people do to help you so that you can help these nonprofits, so you can help them grow.
And I love you for
it. That's what I'm saying to you.
That's a big deal. We were talking about a coffee this morning. It's like, the biggest problem is, it's like my wife says, how many more projects do you need?
Yeah, exactly.
I just, if I get impassioned about something and I feel, if I start talking about something, if you listen to these deals I do, I'm talking by myself with my cell phone, and you hear the happiness in my voice or you hear me laughing at myself, that's genuine. That's not, talking about the dark parts. I'm willing to talk. Many people aren't. They can't even go there. I have the gift. I can go back there because I'm not going.
Right.
You offer me, I'm in a lot of pain. You offer me an opiate, and the answer is no. Not, I don't want that. I don't want an alternative. I'll figure out how to get through it. My wife's going through just a ton of stuff right now, and it's disheartening to watch. I mean, I'm a year older than her, and I've done a lot more to my body than she ever did to hers. But genetics has something to do with it.
Yeah.
It's just sad. It's tough.
I wish for you and your wife that whatever you guys are going through, that it is peaceful, and that it is something that you guys can grow through, and that she moves through her own healing at her own time, and which is perfect.
I hope so
that
too,
way.
buddy. I really do, because it's tough to watch. It's tough to be, not. It's frustrating to not be able to go, you're fixed.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm also cognizant of the fact that does not happen.
Sure.
Unless there's some miraculous interference.
Right.
You know what a coincidence is, right? It's a happening where God chooses to remain anonymous.
Yeah, there you go.
So there are no coincidences.
There are no coincidences, right? Exactly.
So thank you again. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Love this.
Cheers.